pleasure to be here this evening. Glad to get to talk about this. It's going to work here. I'm an educator over in Southeast Ohio, and I'm also a landowner. My family, I live on our family farm down in Southeast Ohio. My boys are seventh generation on the farm, and I never thought I'd get up and talk about a subject like this because when I'm talking as an ag educator, I've really never got up and talked about anything that could be perceived as controversial, but I was so concerned about some of the things that are going on that I just wanted to get up and try to give you the facts the best that I can. I'm not trying to be pro, I'm not trying to be con, and I hope I don't come across that way. I'm just trying to give you the information the best that I can from the sources that I have, so hopefully it comes across that way. That is my intent. And again, I'm not trying to be pro or negative on drilling, but just try to give you the best information that I can. So my goal tonight is to try to share with you as much information I can about the process and the impacts of drilling and what's going on from a local all the way up to an international level. And then if you decide that you may want to lease them, then certainly I want you to listen to what Clif has to say tonight, because if you're someone that's interested in leasing, these leases can last for many, many generations. I'm trying to clean up leases on my farm right now. Whether I lease or not, I don't know if I ever will, but if I choose to, I need to have some clear leases, and I'm trying to clear up leases from 50, 60 years ago. And these leases have long been what I thought's been dead, but they haven't been released, and to be able to lease again, I've got to make sure that these leases are clear. So many of you that may think you have a clear lease, you may need to check that out. And Clif will talk a little bit more about this. But before you do anything, before you ever sign, make sure you see an attorney. That's if you leave with no other information tonight, do not sign anything without seeing an attorney, and make sure you understand what's going on. Just a bit of history here. This is over in Ohio. Oil's been struck in Monroe County. Farmers will be beset on every hand by speculating fakers as well as by genuine producers to lease their lands for the purpose of drilling for oil and gas. To these farmers, we offer a word of advice. Don't sign your name to a lease until you have submitted it to an attorney in whom you have confidence. It goes on to talk about some things, but this not influence anyone. The Monroe County field will be tested thoroughly. There are many opportunities for leasing advantageously. Look before you leave. You see when this was done? Back on Thursday, April 16th, 1891. This is nothing new. It's happened before. It may happen again. So don't get yourself too nervous about any of this. This, folks, has the potential to be life-changing. And I like to talk about where it can be life-changing. It can be changing for the better, and it can be changing for the worse. Large bonus payments. And let me first explain what a bonus payment is, just so everybody understands. A bonus payment is the money that you get for signing the lease. It gives them the right to go in and drill at some point. That's the bonus payment you get up front, whether it's at $10 an acre, $100,000 or whatever per acre. That's called the bonus payment. Then if the well goes into production, then it becomes a royalty payment. So you have the potential. There is a potential out there for large bonus payments. It's really changed in our neck of the woods in just 12, 14 months. The change has been phenomenal. It's gone from $10 an acre to as high as $5,000 an acre. So the change has been phenomenal there. What to expect here, I have no idea, and I'm not even trying to speculate. But you know, when they find sweet spots, the prices goes up. So there is potential for large bonus payments. When my land is only worth $1,500 an acre, and they're offering those large payments, you know, that's something you need to really think about. It has the potential for large royalties. If these wells go into production, there's that potential. Now, if these wells do go into production, how long are they going to last? You know, that's something that we need to think about, and it can change our community. It can change it for the better, it can change it for the worse. It depends, you know, what side you're on or where you're at in the business community. If you happen to have a small business like a restaurant in the area where I'm at, we've seen a large influx in the amount of customers they have. We're seeing some of the local businesses as payments come in, starting to get more money and have more business. So you see it happening there. It can change it for the better, and things can change for the worse as well. There's no question about it. Poor financial planning is a big thing. These bonus payments are akin to winning the lottery, and we've seen it happen a lot over in Pennsylvania. Now, where can we learn from? We can learn right now from what's happened in Pennsylvania, and we in Ohio are going to try to avoid the mistakes that were made there, and hopefully folks in Illinois, if you choose to do this stuff, can avoid the mistakes that the rest of us have made. But poor financial planning is a big one. You've heard studies that, that within a few years after winning the lottery, all the money's gone. The same thing happens here. So you need to plan properly. And you'll see why at the end of my presentation, if you choose to lease, why it's so important to plan properly. Royalties diminish rapidly. A lot of people, when they get those first checks, you're getting a whole bunch of money. The problem is, how long is that going to last? You know, they estimate in Pennsylvania, and that's the best place that I can kind of relate to, they estimate the half-life on these wells to be anywhere from 2 to 3 years. So you're going to get half of the production in these wells in the first 2 to 3 years, and then the next half of production for the next X amount of years. It could be 20, 30 years or more. An example, on my farm where there was an old well on the farm, it probably produced as much oil and gas in the first 2 years as it has produced in the past 30 years. So, you know, just expect that. Don't expect those checks to come in indefinitely because it's going to tail off. So you'll see that tail. It can change your property, maybe for a long time. If they come in and put in one of these pads, we're talking 4 to 8 acre pads or more if they're going to do horizontal drilling. That's a pretty large pad. How long is it going to be there? I don't know. But there's a shot where we're at in Ohio where they may come in and drill one well on a pad that may be able to support 4 to 8 wells, come and drill one well, and then leave, go somewhere else, and hold that pad or that whole unit by production, whether it's 640 acres or 1,280 acres, they can hold that whole pad by production, then go on and drill somewhere else. Because if they signed a bunch of leases, they may need to do that, you know, to get the wells on the leases before they end up expiring. But how long is that pad going to be there? Now, if you have 2,000 acres, taking up 4 to 8 acres, or maybe even 10 acres may not be a big deal, but if you have 40 acres, and they come and put on a 4 to 10 acre pad, that can be a big difference, can't it? You just need to be aware of that if you choose to sign a lease. You just need to be aware of that. And how long is that pad going to be there? I don't know, but you need to be prepared, if you sign one of these, for these to be there for a long period of time. Some research done over at Penn State University said that once those pads were removed, in about 3 years, that area returned back to production, back to normal production. And depending on the situation, when they are done and they remove stuff, the footprint on that area is going to be anywhere from maybe a half an acre to an acre. Now, the upside to this is, if they have a 640 acre unit, in Ohio, our wells are on 40 acres. The old vertical wells are on 40 acre units. So if you take a 640 acre unit, now we have the 1 footprint on that 640 acres versus the 16 footprints that had the potential to be drilled. So that's kind of some of the differences that you can expect. The imprint's going to be a lot bigger in that one spot, but over that 640 acres, it has the potential to be less. Gas lines. This is another one, and they're seeing it happen in Pennsylvania. What happens when they drill all these wells? There's going to need to be some new lines put in, won't there? That old well on my farm that had that 1.5 inch to 2 inch line going out that hauled out all the oil and gas, and I had that big 4 inch transmission line going across my farm. Well, now they're putting 6 to 8 inch lines just right out of the wells. So how long, you know, so you need to be aware that there's going to be gas lines or lines to transport products. And then the transmission lines, of course, will be larger as well. Water issues. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but one important thing is that if something does go wrong, how can you prove it? Unless you get your water tested first. Now, these oil companies are going to be out getting the water tested. They're doing it in Ohio and Pennsylvania. They may go out 3,000 feet past the wells and get the water tested. Are they doing it for your benefit or for their benefit? You just need to know and understand that. In Ohio, we have 3 layers of testing that you can do to get your water tested, get it tested by an independent party, and then if something does go wrong, you have that pretest done there that can help prove it. You want to get it tested for quality. How about quantity? You may want to get your water tested for quantity too. Get that tested up ahead of time as well. Okay. How about family-neighbor relationships? How about if you as a parent gave one of your children the farm, gave another child some other assets, because my dad always said he's not going to divide things up equally, he's going to divide things up equitably. And so it turned out we all got nothing, but that's beside the point. He spent it all, so good for him. I'm glad. He did me very, very well. But if you'd happen to give one of your children the farm and maybe another child some other assets, then suddenly this one child signs a lease, gets this large bonus payment, starts getting royalties. Is that going to create issues? How about with your neighbors? How about if they put a pad next to a neighbor that doesn't want anything done? We need to think about these things ahead of time. It's a very important thing to consider. You're going to have issues. You're going to have issues. I can remember when they drilled a well on my farm where Grandma was at, and they didn't have any issues with the first company, but eventually that company that drilled the well sold it, then they sold it, then they sold it, and then they sold it. So now I'm down to people that are running on a very marginal operation, and we have issues. We have issues. The issues are because either I don't understand the contract or the contract's not followed. If you're thinking about signing a lease, you need to listen to what Clif has to say tonight, because that lease can last for many, many years, for many generations. You need to understand that. That's why I go back to the fact that don't sign a lease till you've gone to an attorney in whom you have confidence. And we actually have a landowners group in our county where an attorney has got together and put a lease together that's landowner friendly. He went to a company to start negotiating, and the company said something that really stuck to me. The company said, I assume you have a lease, don't you? Because if not, I can provide one for you. And he's actually providing a lease that has landowner-friendly terms with it. Now, I'm sure there's going to be changes made to it, but isn't it an important concept that the negotiations are starting from your favor and not from the oil company's favor? And to me, I think that is a very, very big consideration. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. So if they bring a quote-unquote standard contract to you, you need to go to an attorney and make sure that your issues are addressed. There's going to need to be negotiation, because if you sign a lease, you're going to become business partners. You need to understand that. There's going to be give and take. It's going to be give and take. Increased traffic. There'll be a lot more traffic. The extreme, you look at Williston, North Dakota, where all the traffic's at, where that community's been changed. Right now, the number 2 producing oil and gas state in the nation is North Dakota. It surpassed last month Alaska. That's what's happened up there with this shale energy development. It's now Alaska's 3, Texas is number 1. It's changed. And they're having a lot of infrastructure issues up there. Schools, roads, housing, things like that. If you look at Illinois and Ohio, even if a boom would happen, it's not likely to be the extreme that is up there, because we do have more infrastructure in place here than they have in that extremely rural part of the country. But that is an extreme that you need to consider. So it can change your community. If I happen to live right on a highway where all these trucks are going up and past all the time, is it going to affect my quality of life? Yes, it is. It's going to affect it for a while. Certainly will. There is no question about it. So there will be some changes. What am I willing to give up? That's what I think about all the time. At what cost am I willing to have potential damages and changes to my farm for a lease with bonus payments and a potential for a more secure financial future? Boys are 7th generation on this farm. They bought it from the federal government in 1825. I care for and value my farm. I also have a son that's ready to start college. I make too much money for him to get grants, and he's not smart enough to get scholarships. I need to come up with some money. So, that's something I think about. I think about, at one moment, wouldn't it be great to have that bonus payment to help pay for my son's college? Then at night, I'll wake up in a cold sweat dreaming that these bulldozers and trucks are going up my driveway. So you just need to understand what's going on, what to expect, and not to be surprised by what can happen. Spend a lot of time on this. I'd like to talk a little bit, I'll talk a little bit about this slide, or maybe even quite a bit about it. I don't know if this pointer's working. Yeah, okay, it's working here. You hear the term fracking a lot, and we had a question this morning at the meeting. What's the difference between fracking and hydraulic fracturing? That's a good question. When I ask people what fracking is, when I was interviewed by a TV station in Cleveland one day, they said, what's your opinion of fracking? And I asked them, I said, what's your definition of fracking? And they didn't have an answer. When I was in elementary school, I ended up going to a Christian school, and we'd use the word frack instead of the other F word so we wouldn't get in trouble. But also, when they came in and drilled a well on Grandma's farm back when I was 18, when they went and hydraulically fractured the well, they called it fracking as well. So the term fracking draws up emotion. So when people ask me, has fracking caused groundwater contamination, I've always said, except in a case or two, no. But if your definition of fracking is the whole process of the drilling operation, then the answer would be yes. But if your definition of fraction is the hydraulic fracturing portion of the whole drilling process, the answer is it could have happened in a few situations, but it's very unlikely for it to happen. And let me explain. Where does most of the issues happen? If you look at this slide here, and I'm sorry it's not better, but the groundwater table is up here at the top, then thousands of feet down is where the layer of shale is at. There's a lot of geology between the areas. Up at the top, most of the issues that they found in places like Pennsylvania has been improper casing, where the cement job hasn't adhered to the geology or to the casing well enough. And in a lot of situations there in Pennsylvania, below the water table may have been something like a coal bed, and methane may have escaped up the sides of the casing and got up into the groundwater. In some places up in northeast Ohio, there's actually methane that's naturally occurring in some of the water, which again is why you need to make sure that you have your water tested ahead of time if you choose to do this. So if something does happen, you have some baseline data to support your argument. There's also been many issues with surface water problems, and I'll show you some slides later on where you could see where things could happen. In Ohio, it's the law for anything that comes out of the ground has to go back into the ground in terms of a disposal well. There are layers down in here where there is nasty, brackish fluids down in there. There is salt brine water that may have heavy metals in it. In Ohio, some of it may even have low-level, naturally occurring radiation in it. There's nasty stuff down in the ground. And as a matter of fact, I'll go as far as to say it's probably the stuff that's down in the ground is nastier than what's used in some of the frac fluids. So that's why it's the law in Ohio that anything that comes up out of the ground by law has to go back down in the ground in terms of disposal wells. It's supposed to go back down in a geology that naturally accepts it in a formation similar to where it came out of. They think that's the best way to get rid of it. In Pennsylvania, for the longest time, they were actually running the stuff through municipal sewage treatment plants. Now, can they handle heavy metals and naturally occurring low-level radioactive waste? No. Some of it was being illegally dumped. There's been some accidents, some spills, some line breaks. So, yeah, it's happened in the past. It's happened in the past. But science would argue that if you hydraulically fracture down here, the cracks, from a geologic perspective, it's virtually impossible for them to go all the way up to the top. When you go in and hydraulically fracture, what they actually will do is go in with a pipeline with the line down in the ground, and they'll have some holes kind of drilled in a little bit into the metal, and I'll show you some pictures of it after a bit, and they'll set out charges. I think about 45 caliber charges, I'm not sure, but those charges will send a crack out about 4 to 5 feet. Then they'll come in with that high pressure, 6,000 to 10,000 pounds of pressure, they'll use the water, the sand, and the other fluids or chemicals in, and then use about 6,000 to 10,000 pounds of pressure, open up the existing cracks, and that sand will lock into place, and then let the fluids naturally escape. And when they hydraulically fracture it, it's akin to shaking up a bottle of pop. You know, they force it in, and then when you crank it open, that's when they release it, and the fluids tend to come back, the fluids will come back out. That's why the oil and gas tends to free flow out naturally. The tendency is not for any of the fluids to keep working up through the cracks in the geology. It's going to be to come back down out. Also, when you start sending up cracks vertically, the geology will force at some point for any of the cracks to turn sideways. Now, could a situation here happen where a fracture down here, thousands of feet down, work its way up to the top? You talk to geologists and they say the answer it's just extremely unlikely that anything like that could happen. Now, is there a situation where it could happen? There's a couple plausible situations where it could happen. One is, if we're hydraulically fracturing down here, and let's say this layer here had an old well, and maybe it was fractured back in the 60s or 70s and wasn't properly sealed, and the casing was shot. Could something happen? They think that's the most likely scenario where something like that could happen. Also, if it happened to be on a fault line, could that happen where there'd be a straight line to go up? Possibly so. But also, you know, there's nasty fluids already down there as well. What else I got to talk about that? Does that kind of got that covered? Okay. If you have any questions, just please ask them, and at the end, I'll try to address them for you. Okay. Lisa Jackson is the Deputy Minister of the EPA. She said in a statement to Congress back on June 25th, science doesn't support the migration of gas from fracking. Pressure's too great. There are also economic reasons not to frack beyond the shale layer. But then afterwards, back in December, there was a potential fracking problem in Wyoming. And could there have been a problem there? You know, my answer is they haven't given the exact results yet of the stuff that they've done or some of the testing that they've done. But could have something happened? From what I've read, the answer is it could have happened. These wells were drilled at 1,500 feet deep and hydraulically fractured back in the 60s. And it was done in a sandstone formation. And just above it or in it was the groundwater table. Some of the wells were drilled as deep as 800 feet deep. So over that time, could have something happened there with that small a geology between the distances? I wouldn't be surprised if something like that could have happened. But now we're talking thousands of feet difference here. So that's kind of the rest of the story on that. Most problems are either pre-existing or methane moving up from a different layer as a result of casing issues. And there's becoming more increasing consensus among government industry and some environmental groups that actually the hydraulic fracturing is really not the issue. Some of the casing issues and surface water spills are more of an issue. So those are some things that they're working on a lot more trying to take care of. I've mentioned the other stuff there. What are some of the chemicals used in hydraulic fracturing? This is from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. These are the products that they've used, and you can find these online, what they use. They use some acids, some friction reducers, scale inhibitors, surfactants, biocides, clay stabilizers, breakers, and crosslinkers. In Ohio, every time hydraulic fracturing is going on, there is an inspector from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources there monitoring exactly what's going on. They have to report exactly what they use, what goes down in, and what comes back up out. This was an actual, this I got from Mike McCormick with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. This is the actual amount of stuff that was used on a hydraulic fracturing job back on December 19th. They used 4.04 million gallons of water. That was 85.99%, 12.91% sand, 0.4% acid, and you can see the rest of the products there. So basically 99% was water and sand, and the rest was the other products or chemicals there. They used approximately 14 different products and 32 subproducts, including the sand and water, not 700 that you hear about. So that's actually what they use. So what does it look like? This is what a hydraulic fracturing job will look like. You can look up here and see all the equipment that's being used. You can see where they're storing fresh water, sand storage units. There's the fluid storage before it's disposed of. All of these trucks here are trucks that create the high pressure. There's a data van, so there's a lot of things going on there. And you can see how it takes up so much area. So I think they have found out where some of the groundwater issues are at. In Pennsylvania, actually, some of the groundwater problems they've had were casing issues. They weren't sure where the bottom of the water table was at. So they would put these conductor casings down in, and sometimes where they've had issues at, they found out later on that the casing didn't go down below the lowest level of groundwater, and that caused some issues. In Ohio, all of our groundwater tables are mapped, and it's required by law that they go down at least 50 feet below any water table, and when any of this casing issues are, or when this casing and cementing is going on, a person from ODNR is there to monitor exactly what's going on. But they use multiple cemented casing strings to protect groundwater. They use a conductor, service, intermediate, and production line. Here's an actual site we were at last year over in southwestern Pennsylvania. This first line here is the conductor casing. That's on the left-hand side. They'll actually, a lot of these companies now don't even drill down through the groundwater table. They actually blow with air a hole down through the groundwater table, and these are approximate numbers, but about 24 inches around, they'll drill, and then they will put that first casing on the left-hand side down in all the way through the groundwater table, and in Ohio, down at least 50 feet below, they'll center that 20-inch casing, and then they'll pump cement all the way down through and then back up the side so they have a solid seal. And now they're making sure, and the ODNR geologists there's some enhanced regulations there to make sure that cement has a chance to seal, and then it's tested to make sure that it's sealed. Then they go in with that second one from the left. That's approximately a 16-inch casing, and they'll go all the way down through the geology where they think there could be a potential for anything escaping, such as methane. They'll go all the way down through, drill. They'll put that casing all the way down, center it. They'll pump cement all the way down in, and then back up the sides between that first and second casing. Then they'll go in with that third casing, and in some situations, they may even go all the way horizontal with that, center it, cement it, and then eventually they'll bring in this last one, this 8-inch production line. So what does it look like? Here's a situation here where they have done it. This doesn't have the outside layer of cement between the geology and the conductor casing. But you can see a good example there of what's being done. So why is this such a big deal, folks? Why is this such a big deal? There's been 1.5 billion barrels of oil produced in Ohio since 1860. Conservative estimates are there's 5.5 billion barrels still available. There's an awful lot. Some folks believe in Ohio, where all these old wells are at, that maybe they've only taken 40% of the available oil and gas out there, that they still think 60% of it may be there. The Utica in Ohio is the hot spot. It has more potential than the Marcellus because it has more oil. And it's going to depend, how much oil or gas is down there. It's going to depend how deep that shale is. And that shale is like a book up on its edge. It's a book up on the edge. And all that shale is like pages of a book all the way through. They used to drill down through in Ohio to the Rose Run. They would drill through the Utica shale, and they would find a little bit of oil and gas, but not much to make it worthwhile. But all of the oil and gas and the natural gas liquids are locked between those pages or in those cracks. So when they started going horizontal and being able to go through, they could intercept those cracks, and that's what suddenly made it more of a viable option. And I got on such a tangent, I forget what I was talking about now. So there's some good options there. The Utica in Ohio is close to the bottom, and then there's below that maybe another layer, but then we get down to metamorphic rock. That's basically down to where we get down to granite, and there's nothing there. But the shale, if you think about it, could oil or gas come from a sandstone formation? No. Oil and gas had to have come from organic matter. Shale's organic matter. That's where it came from. Many geologists believe the source of all the oil and gas, at least in Ohio, is from the Utica. That's the source of all the oil and gas, everything above and below it. So all the other oil and gas had migrated up from those areas. Somebody back in January asked me, they said, Chris, if all the oil and gas migrated up from there over time, why can't frac fluid do that? That was a good question. I didn't have an answer to it. I talked with Dr. Bob Chase. He's a geologist over at Marietta College, and he gave me the explanation really good. Now, I believe that heaven and earth was created in a day, so it was no issue. It was created that way, but he said if you're looking at it from a geologic perspective, 250 million years ago, that shale was the surface of the earth. And then over time, over millions of years, as formations formed over the top, and that organic matter was decaying, pressure was put on that, and some of the stuff started escaping up. And then maybe it got locked into other places as it worked up over time. Now, for the past millions of years, it's been a stable situation. In Illinois here, there's approximately 32,000 oil and gas production wells. This I found interesting, 10,500 Class II injection wells. We only have 177 in Ohio, and 1,750 gas storage wells in Illinois. If you sign a lease, why does it say that they can't come in and put a storage well on your property, or a disposal well, or a compression station? You need to think about that. You need to understand what's going on with the lease. The producing area here is referred to as the Illinois Basin, and it's a New Albany shale that is in this formation. It can be up to 4,500 feet deep here. They estimate there's 90 to 160 trillion cubic feet of gas in this formation.